in my hometown down under here. I feel like it's time to push on. Driving back from the west coast, chewing black sand. The radios are playing the blues. It's good just to be alive, to be young, to be loved. Yes, it's good just to be alive. And this is a place you can do whatever you please.
You're about to discover how to make 6 arrangements for events in a little town. Low budget means they're all garden flowers. High impact means they have to have the wow factor. Our very first one is going to be a business meeting. There are 40 people coming right here to the headquarters of Floral Design, and they are the local business association. They've come to find out more about what we're doing about flowering up Kairoa. They're also really curious about how we can run Floral Design headquarters internationally from such a little town. So I'm going to go inside and show you how I'm going to do the arrangement that is going to be for the table where all of the food and nibbles is going to go on. Let's get started. The table has to be spectacular, but I also want it to be very modern, because these business people have never seen design outside our florist shops in New Zealand, which really only sell bouquets. So I'm going to do something quite startling to get their attention. 3 pieces of firewood. One of them I was lucky enough to find that had legs on them here, and I just really plonked them, there's no other word for it, onto the table in a position where I like them. It also is where they're naturally balanced, and now I have to work out where I'm going to drill the holes for the test tubes along here. The essential part of it is the rhododendron that I'm going to use. They're huge, so I'm not going to need many holes. One there immediately, so I'm going to mark it with a cross. That's where the drill mark is going to be. We'll put another one there, here, so fairly close, away from the knot. It's quite hard to drill where a knot is. What I'm doing now in my head is actually visualizing this to see if I do want another one, and I actually do. So I'm going to drill another hole there. And that is all the planning that's needed.
Right, once you've got your wood marked, you then place it in the vise so that the place that you're actually going to drill is uppermost. We've taken the size of the test tube, we've taken the size of the drill bit, and they're the same. Nice and simple. Make sure you've got glasses on, safety glasses, and your earmuffs. And away we go. Perfect. Right, we've now changed the drill bit to a much smaller one, as you can see here, and we're just going to drill about 15-20 mils into the wood, so it will take these stands with candles on the end. So just a little hole. So then we just pop it into the hole. And there it is, ready to go.
I've put the flower tubes in their holes. I have put a tiny bit of glue on the bottom of the candle holders. The glue is PVA, it's wood glue. It's not really happy wood on metal, but it will dry in about 2 or 3 hours, and I've got about 6 before anybody starts arriving. So plenty of time for that glue to dry. I've taken all the leaves off the rhododendrons because I want this to be a really modern design, not fussy at all. And these are the leaves of Japanese iris. Tofu would work, anything like that. I just want them so that they will bend like this. Going to put a leaf in each one and then the rhododendron. You could use any big flower for this design. It's the big boldness of the flower that makes it look so spectacular and yet really simple to make. The other thing is, if you have access to a drop saw, you will get beautiful 90-degree angles on all of these things that you've drilled in. Now we're going to just bend these over, making sure I'm not bending it where the flames are going to be on the candlesticks. Light the candles. This arrangement is destined for the local college. It's a small area that has no access to the back or the side, so the arrangement is only going to be viewed from two sides. I will make as much as I can back here in the studio so there's minimum disruption when I get there and I can put in the plant material very fast. The stand is homemade. It is a square of very heavy metal, and this is a bolt. And the bolt has been welded into the middle of the square. The metal has to be heavy so everything will stand up. This is just a rod, and on a lathe a thread has been worked into it that matches the thread of that bolt. So when you turn it, it secures the rod in position and you have a stand. The top of the metal rod has been sharpened to quite a lethal point, and therefore I use a plastic test tube as a protector whenever I'm not using it, because that point could take your eye or do serious damage to your body. You need to get a washer that is the same diameter on the inside as the rod. Around the part where I want it, I have wound electrical tape. It's black and it's sticky and it comes in lots of colours. Electricians use it. I have no idea what for. And if you wind it around there, it creates a ledge. Then when you put the washer on top, you have got this wonderful little shelf for the rest of your mechanics. This is a metal cage made by a local floral art member's husband. But all it is square wire that has been made into that shape. You also will need some cable ties. I'm using black ones, and they come in various sizes from small right through those giant ones, and you'll also need some floral foam. Now the cage has been designed so that it takes exactly half a block of floral foam. The floral foam comes with third marks and a half mark, so it's easy just to cut it on that half mark for how much you need. The reason we put that into the cage is this stops the foam from crumbling. I'm going to be using big plant material for New Zealand flax, and it can easily, once this is wet, crumble all these corners and just almost disintegrate. So this is the reason that you use a cage. If you can't find something like this, go to your local hardware shop and just look for netting that's got these little squares, and then cut it out so it's into a cube. To get your dimensions, use the piece of floral foam to measure it and say that's exactly what you want. So this now needs to be wet. It's now wet, and push it into the cage. The washer is bigger than the holes in the cage, and that's why it won't go through. You don't have to worry about it slipping at all. It's going to be slightly off centre because centre would have a piece of wire on it there. The top with nothing on it. I'm going through there and just pushing it straight down on there. And that's as solid as it can possibly be. If people are going to knock that, nothing's going to happen. don't have to worry about it at all. The key is a heavy base, and the key is having that little shelf under there so nothing's going to slide. Right, I don't have to now have my little protective cap so it doesn't take my eye out, and this will all fit in the vehicle that is going down to the school, so I can now carry on building. To hide the stand, I'm going to use this beautiful panga. It has come down out of the forest onto one of the New Zealand beaches. It's been in the surf, it's made its black, and it's got the most beautiful shapes in it. You could use beautiful twisted pieces of driftwood, anything at all that you can wrap around the stand. So I'm going to wrap that around there, using the cable tie. Find the one that's appropriate for the width, hide it as much as I can, and I'll also do the bottom, thread it through itself. Black ones because this is black, and I'm going to build up several layers of this so that the stand is much thicker, so it's going to be more in scale with what I'm doing. And with that done, that's as far as I can go before I have to relocate to the college entrance and put all the beautiful bits on the top. It's easier to do this one outside. It's going into the foyer, but being outside I don't have to worry about the carpet and anything like that. We've also waited until the kids have left school. There's still an event going on inside, which is lots of teachers in an enormous big meeting, and so we've found ourselves a not too quiet little corner to get this done and show you. The first thing is covering up the cage, and I'm using variegated pittosporum, and I've picked it because the green and the white is exactly the same colour as the lilies and the New Zealand flax I'm going to use. The sole job of this is to cover the foam, so I'm going to make it quite dense, quite long, and just push the pittosporum in all around it. Look for foliage yourself. It's long lasting. This design has to last a fortnight. School is not wealthy, so they like their designs to last as long as possible. I'm not doing it close either, because it's far more interesting if these go out a little bit. It gives the whole thing space. School has a careers day coming up. The hall is used for all sorts of events. Sometimes I think it's as busy as a hotel foyer. Before I go much further, I have to put in some test tubes. This is for the lilies I'm going to use. They are so much better, they last so much longer when they are in tubes rather than in floral foam. So I'm just going to carve a piece out to make it easier, and then the test tube will fit in there, and it means that our lilies can have as much water as they possibly want. Another cool trick when something's going to last this long is to every morning put ice cubes on the top of the floral foam. As they melt, it gives them the water that they need. You can see that the tube fits very nicely between the cages on this side, but obviously because the water level is not going to go right at the top, I'll only be able to use a small lily for that one. Now I'll carry on with the greenery. It's one of the longest flaxes you can get in New Zealand, and I've got it for its length. I'm going to split it in half, right the way down, because I want the length of it. And this is going to swirl down and around the base. Flax, that way it burns beautifully, that way it doesn't. So when you're using it, bend it the way that it bends beautifully. Make it nice and sharp on the end. check my bend and pop it in. We're going to create these big swirls coming down and around and into these parts. And tuck it down inside one of the cable ties that you use to attach the black pangaro to. And make this one curl through the back. Now we want to continue the line of that driftwood up to here, so I've got a couple of spare pieces that I'm, lovely big point on it, that I'm just going to push in to there, and a taller piece that gives it the height. So whatever you use to cover your base, use the same thing so it goes all the way down, and suddenly this piece here is in the middle. I'm going to now carry on adding more of this lovely flax. Time to add the water to those flower files, and then add the lilies. Position them straight down into the flower files so that they rise up above the floral foam. I'm also putting that in that side little flower file so that they will float down sideways. If you need to keep the Aran lilies in a particular place, just use a pin right through them, it works well, and then carry on adding more of the flax. This time I'm going to skewer it up into those top pieces there, one threaded right down over the stick, and then the second one over the top, both of them sheltering the design. Add more pittosporum or your filler material to cover up any sign of the cage whatsoever, just putting it in bulk in that middle. A little touch of cold glue, floral adhesive, at the top will adhere the piece of the flax to the stick, so as it dries it's not going to ping off, and your arrangement is done. We've now moved it into the foyer of the high school, all ready to have been admired through all the events that we're going to have this week, which includes a Careers Day and visiting teachers. So they were pretty pleased to have it in their reception. We're in the refinery. It's a very trendy cafe, and it has big events in it during the evening here. This particular event is a fashion show, and it's retro. So they're taking old clothes, jazzing them all up, and having them so they're ready to wear for the modern lady. Therefore, obviously, I had to do something about the mannequin. This mannequin here, I think it's cheap as chips. I don't know where it's come from. I was given it. And it's on a stand, it goes to there, then a metal pipe comes up to here, then there's a washer, and the washer is actually holding the mannequin in place. So the whole of the mannequin in this section here is sitting on that pipe that's welded onto the middle of the mannequin. I'm going to go for recycled, repurposed things that are part of the theme, and I went and found in one of the junk shops in town an old Vogue pattern. When you're looking for a pattern, find one that has got as many skirt lengths in it as possible, because you're going to need one for either side of the front and another one or two for the back. Of course you can use two patterns. Because the mannequin was made of wire, it was easy for me to just pin the skirt through those little wires and work your way right the way around, just putting the pins in place so that the paper pattern goes right down to the ground. By the time you've finished pinning, you will have one on one side of the front, one on the other side of the front, and fortunately my third piece of skirt pattern went right round the back of the mannequin, because obviously it is quite a small frame, unlike a real woman. And this in effect completely covers the bottom half. The pattern had two pieces, a back and a front for the bodice, so I pinned them both onto the front. Of course that left me with a dilemma of what I was going to use to cover the back. Fortunately again my pattern had long sleeves on it, and the sleeve pattern was a perfect fit to go across the back, and all I did was cut it to the right shape. She was still looking rather gappy round her middle, and so I used the scraps of the pattern that you would normally cut out, and I used this almost like a cummerbund to go around the shape. This is Hexanet Deco that comes from Denmark, and it is coloured chicken wire. It comes in a long length in all sorts of different colours, so if you ever find it, search it out and buy as much as you can. If you can't find it, you can do exactly the same thing with ordinary chicken wire and just spray paint it to the colour you want. I cut it to the size I required so it went right down to the bottom, and then I crimped it across to the back so it was going to stay in place. I kneaded the edges just by folding them over, and then using a little bit of wire that was almost the same colour, I pushed the wire between the chicken wire around one of the mannequin bits of wire, twisted it once, twice, 3 times, cut it out, and this is to hold the netting onto the mannequin. I'm going to be doing a lot of work and pulling as I'm attaching other things, so I had to stay in place and not fall off. I attached it in 3 different places, 2 on the back and another one on the front. This is really the advantage of having a wire mannequin rather than a polystyrene one, just simply for the attaching of this wire netting. So now my piece of wire netting, which is a garland I guess, is going all the way up from the bottom up to the top, and I'm ready to attach these flower files. Curled a piece of wire 3 times around the rim with 2 tails on the end, put 1 tail into the wire netting, and then the other tail is used to wind it 1, 2, 3 times, cut it off, and the first part of your test tube is attached. If you're having trouble getting it tight enough, use pliers. These will really tighten up that twist. There's quite a knack to it, because if you tighten it too much the wire will break, but it is a cool way of getting that a nice tight twist to hold it in place. You still need to attach another piece of wire to the bottom of the test tube so it holds really securely in place. When plant material and water goes in, these can be quite heavy and twist in all sorts of ways. You don't want that to happen. Thread the wire underneath the netting, around the test tube, and then do the famous twist again, 1, 2, 3, and cut off the ends. And that is a very secure way to hold a test tube onto wire netting. You're going to attach heaps of those onto the garland, 15, 20, 25 of them. The more you attach, the more spectacular the finished result is going to be, and the more fresh plant material you can use in the final piece. Scatter them from top to bottom all the way down unevenly. Don't make a pattern of it, just put them as you need to, where and when. It gives you plenty of choices of where to put the plant material in. At this point I left it for a couple of days. The preparation was all done. and I've started to put in the plant material. These are native New Zealand reeds. They're not hollow, they're just beautifully straight green reeds, and I'm threading them through on the diagonal, and they're holding in place because of the number of times I'm threading them through the chicken wire. I try to keep them as much as I can on the same diagonal and within 3 or 4 centimeters of the edges of the sides of the chicken wire. I didn't want them sticking out too far and too long because there'd be quite a lot of foot traffic going past. I'm now going the opposite direction, so I'm getting this crisscross diagonal effect all the way down. The more of these that you can put on, the more effective your garland's going to be. It really isn't tedious, it doesn't take long at all, but it does give a beautiful green background, still with an airy feeling that's very, very light. So persevere and just put them in. They are quite random. I'm not measuring anything. I don't want to end up looking like a grid. I just want a really interesting background green. The next addition were little sprigs of that variegated Coprosma again, this time attached to the wire netting with yellow cable ties. As I completed the little attachment, I made sure the cable ties are all sticking straight out frontwards, and they then became another texture as part of the overall design. Positioning these was everywhere. They were on a subtle zigzag from top to bottom, but not so obvious that anybody was noticing, and coverage probably did 30 of them, going from the top to the bottom. In some cases I felt that they were a bit small and insignificant, and so I doubled them up. They're not in water, completely happy to last out of water for a day, and of course this is just one night function. These cable ties are the smallest ones you can get, brightest yellow and as cheap as chips. Now to give a contrast of form and texture, these are the developing seed heads of spring onions. I happen to have them in the vegetable garden. I was looking for strong vertical forms, and these did it nicely. They're definitely going in the test tubes because they're hollow. They're bigger than the test tubes, so all I did was put a pleat in them, made sure they got down into the water, and they lasted incredibly well, much longer than I thought that they would. I only had 8 of them. I'm using Fibonacci numbers all the way through here, and so this was my 8 of the 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13 proportions, and I spread them evenly from top to bottom. Then the lilies. I cut these very long because I wanted the stalks to also be part of the design. Once again, strong vertical green line with the arum lilies creating the center accents. More water going into the files, and at the top I made sure that the arum was nestling in against the shoulder. To make sure it was where I wanted it to be, I just used cable ties to attach them to the wire netting so that they sat exactly where I wanted them to be. And finally the calendulas. Calendulas for this time of the year, which is the very beginning of spring. They add that lovely bright yellow touch, particularly for a nice function. They last incredibly well, up to a week in water. Again, I cut them with long stems so that these stems also became part of the design, and they were added randomly into the garland in a soft and subtle zigzag. You can see we're now getting definite bulk, and we have a garland of flowers on our little model. design is for a meeting where a VIP, Member of Parliament in this case, is going to talk to a group of older people about political things. Therefore I can make it much taller. It's going to be up on the part of the room where they're talking, so I could be as tall ever. It's in a church. So exactly the same beginnings. We have the metal bottom. I wind the rod into the nut. What's wonderful about this particular structure is it can be reused over and over again. This meeting is only going to last a couple of hours with afternoon tea, and I'll be able to take the flowers out and the structure goes back into the storeroom ready to be used again. It's already been used once at the college, but in a completely different way. I never do the same design twice, but I do use exactly the same mechanics more than once. So how did I make it? This is a very large embroidery frame that I picked up from a craft shop. Across the embroidery frame in two places I have put black painted dowel that has been cable tied into place, and then across those I have been able to put the large flower files. The reason I'm using large ones is I'm going to put lilies in this design and they drink a lot of water. There is a cable tie at the top and a cable tie at the bottom, and they've been spray painted black. The embroidery hoop is only attached to the rod at the moment by two pieces of black electrical wire that I have put here and here over the painted dowel, and therefore up here it's just sitting on there. If you get one of these rods made, don't get a point on it. Besides being unbelievably dangerous, it's not necessary. I don't think I've ever needed to use that point for anything. So if it was flat, it would be much, much easier to do. So I've got to make this secure. So I'm going to use the black tape and just put it over the top to start with, a bit like a bandage. This is to stop it moving. And of course it will stick to itself, and that just holds it in position. And wind it around that way. And it's just not going to move. If you are going to have a black frame for yours, at this point, this is when you spray everything that you colour that you want it, if you don't want it black. We're at the Bible Chapel. The people will be arriving probably as we're doing this. I'm doing it outside because, first of all, for water, saves all the water dripping all over that carpet, and it's also better light for me, and of course just take it straight through the door. I've added a couple extra flower files and now ready to start doing the really, really cool stuff, adding the plant material. First thing you want to do is fill up the flower files. Even this is only going to last a couple of hours, I still like being kind to my plant material. So I've got this lovely piece of black panga. This driftwood has lovely holes through it, so I can put the cable tie through the hole so it's not quite as noticeable. It's a little cable tie, don't make them too big because they are shiny. And tie it really tight, and that is now on there, totally and utterly secure. And it's hidden as much of this as we possibly can. It's now integrated. On with the plant material. New Zealand flax, beautiful colour, called Yellow Wave, and it goes onto this end. This is called a formal linear design, which means strong, clear edges. And out it goes to that end there. Make a slope when you cut it so it will fit in the tube. Not really important to have water. The flax will last 3 or 4 days out of water. Second one goes into the second test tube, and the third one goes into the third test tube at the back. And turn it round to the back and cut off a little bit of the tape. This is the first one. We're bringing it over to here, and we're just sellotaping it at the back. This is the advantage of these not being seen from the back. If they were being seen, you would have to put a second piece of flax over the top to hide it.
keeping them as parallel as we can. And tape it. So when we turn it around now, you have these wonderful bands of colour. Aralia leaf, the biggest one that we could find in the garden. And this has got two jobs. It's to create a different form, but it's also to hide all of the mechanics. So that goes in next. Onto the front one, cut it really short, so tape it down at the back so it holds it down where you want it to go. Electrical tape is the new hidden mechanic. Two stunning lilies, and of course the black of the stamen goes with the black of there, and thread them down into that flower file. And then this one beside it. I might go into that one. The lilies go to the back, all facing, if we can, the same way, facing inwards so they're talking to each other. Thread them down through if you need to. Turn it round so it's facing the right way. Between the aralia and in. Then you take a look and see what it looks like from a distance. So our only other job here now is to hide those two tubes there, and we can do this with another aralia. Aralias last out of water for possibly 3 days. So I'm going to do a weed sheet. I'm going to bring it up this way so it's underneath. It's hiding all those. Then I'm going to attach it right up here with electrical tape to there, to that piece of netting. I'll hold it down the bottom here too. Right, for safekeeping, just do another piece of tape at the bottom here because that's quite heavy. And there it is, an arrangement, very fast for a community event that will last just a couple of hours. The audience arrived, the MP arrived, and the meeting was about to start. The meeting lasted just 2 hours. So we then brought it back to Flora Design headquarters and I added 2 extra flax blades horizontally across the base. I did this because I felt as if it was better balanced and it brought the design right the way across from the left to the right. And it lasted in this capacity at the front entrance for another week. This design is going to the opening of an art exhibition, so to me it seemed logical to create a frame on an easel. The easel I bought commercially, the frame we made in probably an hour. It's made with scrap wood, and it was tongue and groove is what they call it, which means you get this cool little piece on the inside of it there, and we just mitered the corners, which means they're on 45-degree angles, and then I painted it with blackboard paint. The reason I wanted to use blackboard paint is so that I can actually write things on here and at any time I wanted to use this frame again. A really good idea for me, Pyro Bed and Breakfast. I've got somebody booked in, I can always write welcome, put their names on there and they've got a flower arrangement. So backboard paint is really cool for putting in all sorts of cool things. This plastic black tray you can buy in any wholesalers, and it's really versatile. Cut a block of floral foam lengthwise, and the tray is designed so it will take 2 pieces. You might have to squash them in a little bit. I've already wet it, and so there is our floral foam prepared. So now this is the cool piece. You would seem logical that you would just place it there, but then the frame's on the wrong side, so I'm going to place it at an angle, and then I'm going to sit the frame on top of it. Push down hard with the frame on that. Then when you take the frame off, I've got a line there, and that line I'm just going to groove out a little bit because that's my line for holding the frame in place. Now I'm going to carve out that line that the frame made. This is called a vegetative design, which means as if you were lying down in a meadow looking through the grass. The reason I've chosen this style is that the art exhibition is all landscapes and seascapes. Therefore it seemed appropriate to me that I made a real landscape, even if it's wildflower one, to go in here for this opening. Try to pick styles that go with the style of the artist. We've got calendulas, lavender, lilies, daffodils, freesias, a little bit of variegated coprosma, a few pieces of leucadendron, and this is Russian kale. Right, some of it sticking at the back and some of it at the front. Then the trusty electrical tape, and just go right around so it's touching the frame and right around. I can't do it where the groove is, so it's a wee bit long, and this is why I'm using electrical tape rather than florist tape, because it is much stickier. Yeah, it's really tight on there. We now put the frame back on, put it into its little groove there, and the plant material will hold it in place once we get started. So that is your mechanic. I'm going to use the freesias. Freesias hate being in floral foam, so I'm going to put the black test tubes just for the freesias either side of the frame. They'll be at the front. People will bend down and smell them. You won't see these tubes. And I've picked large pieces of lavender. Trim off any droopy parts. There's nothing worse than seeing droopy flowers. It makes it look dead before it is. And this is also going to set the scene. We then go to the leucadendron and pick this one because it's a contrast in form. The vegetative design is quite interesting because there's lots of things to see in it. Some of the other designs are called formal linear, where I use very strong bold edges. This one has nothing like that. I also will need to go taller. I want it right up to here on the frame, so I need to find much taller plant material so it's not just sitting around the bottom here. It's got to be in the frame as well as popping out of the frame. So you can see what's happening with this group line. So you have a little bit of coprosma. Once again, it's another form. You can go at the back. That's about as far as I'm going to go until I get down to the art gallery. I've relocated outside the gallery and we will move it in once it's finished. Now you can start to add the lilies. The whole point of these lilies is to give height and a change of form. Compared to those tizzy bits of plant material I've already put in, those lilies are going to be bold and beautiful and raise the arrangement so it goes upwards to fit into the easel. Just cut off the bottoms of them and push them into the floral foam so that the cut part is sitting on the top of the foam, and so it can get heaps of water. Next in are the daffodils, and I've also cut these as tall as I possibly could. They are going into the same flower files as the freesias are going to go in, because daffodils also hate being in floral foam. Face them to the front and put a button as well, because this will come open in the course of the week. People love these daffodils. They are a real sign of spring, but they also are adding another bold form amongst all that tiz. Now it's the turn of the reeds. Bunch them. They grow in bunches. Vegetative design means that we want it to look as natural as possible, and I'm putting some at the back, some at the front, another form, another vertical line to get right to the top of the frame, and adding another interesting contrast. The kale is next, just a touch of purple on it to add some interest on those stems, and a lovely bold form either side of the lilies. And now it's the turn of that beautiful yellow variegated coprosma that I love so much. It really does highlight any arrangement, brings out a beautiful brightness, and I'm placing them a random front and back again as I'm now lowering the design and starting to cover the floral foam. Not too many pieces, I don't want to form a hedge, just enough to add the colour interest. And then it was the time of the calendulas. Lovely bright spots of colour, and I have cut them as tall as I possibly could from the garden. You could use gerbers as a substitute for this, and they are adding another bold form with the daffodils and those arum lilies. You can see that they are really popping beside all that foliage. And now to the freesias. Just bunch them in loose little posies and place them in the bunches into the flower tubes that they are sharing with the daffodils. Daffodils and freesias get on very well, so this is going to not be a problem with them lasting. They will probably outlast almost everything else in the design, and the smell is amazing. At this point, also spend some time at the back of the arrangement doing the same thing, adding the freesias and the variegated coprosmas and the calendulas, because we want real depth as the plant material moves through the frame. Even though it's only going to be viewed from the front, we want it to look as intense as we can, as deep as we can, looking into this wildflower arrangement. Two very special little winter roses at the front, the only two I had, so you always place them in pole position if you have something very special. And finally, complete your design by covering any remaining floral foam that you can see with these delightful Federation daisies. They're a brilliant thing to have in your garden, even in containers, and surprisingly they last a full week plus in floral foam, and they are a wonderful way to cover floral foam that isn't moss or something that is more normal. Beautifully finished, no floral foam showing, and it's ready to move into the exhibition space. The piece is going to be 1 metre in diameter, so we have a metre ruler, sellotaped 2 pieces of quite tough paper together, and fold it in half so it will give us the centre. So I know now that that there is the very, very centre of my circle. Because I want it to be a metre, I'm finally putting the 50, half a metre, 50 right on there, and then I can mark that part of my circle there, put it on 50 here, and mark my part of the circle here. Obviously this isn't going to be, this doesn't have to be unbelievably accurate because we're dealing with flowers here, but I do want a proper
circle. This is the whole point of these celebratory tributes. I can keep doing this forever, making them smaller and smaller as long as the 50 is right on that centre point. Any extra mark I make is going to make it easier to cut out a reasonably accurate circle. And of course, being a metre, it's wonderful, it's very, very easy. So that's given me the circle that I need. And then I'm going to cut it out. And to make it even easier for cutting out, I'm going to fold it in half to cut it. Make it even simpler, fold it again into a quarter. And then follow the dots. Have a circle. You'll need a protractor for the next bit, which you can pick up from a junk shop for about 50 cents. You probably haven't seen these since school days, because if you have a look at the original, it's been divided into 12 sections around the circle. A circle is 360 degrees, so to divide it into 12 sections, each section is 30 degrees. So you put the protractor. So the piece there that is in the middle of the protractor goes on the centre point. Line up here so that it goes straight on there. So the 0 goes on this line along here with that line there. So you've got it all nice and straight, and you read from that 0 around to the 30. When you get to the 30, you can see I've already done it, you put a dot. That means that is 30 degrees. The next dot you put at 60, because it's 30 more on. The next one at 90. The next one at 120. The next one at 150. And the next one at 180. That has divided the circle into 30 degree segments. Turn the protractor the other way. Centre it again. Put the centre right on the middle of your circle with the line right on the line for the halfway, and do it again. 0, 30, 60, 90, 120, 150 and 180. And that has marked it into 12 sections. Take another look at the original and you'll see the middle part is divided into 8 sections. A circle is 360 degrees. Dividing 360 by 8 is 45 degrees. So now we're going to put the protractor on here again, and we're going to do exactly the same thing again, but we're going to do it for 45 degrees. 45, and I just put the mark further out, and 90, and 45 this way is 135. So that's 45, 90, 135 and 180, and that will give us our quarters, and do the same the other way. Have another look at that design and you'll see there is an inner circle.
So to make the second circle, always put the middle of the metre, which is 50, on the middle there. Halfway between 0 and 50 is 25. So I'm going to go around now and mark a circle that is going to be 25. At the same time, you can go up here and make this one on the 75 mark. Save you doing it twice. Just going to go right the way around and do the same thing, so I end up with this row of dots around here, which is going to be my inner circle. Now connect up the dots. You see, I'm not connecting them up in a straight line, I'm doing them on a gentle curve. Now I can start using these dots that we did before. The inside is divided up into 8, so we're going to take these 45-degree dots here, just connect up through the centre line, through the centre, connect up the dots. Through the centre, connect up the dots. And there we have our 8 pieces, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, for that centre section. So when we now connect up the dots for the 30 degrees, we're only going to connect them up for the outside section. So I'm connecting the 2 dots, making sure it's going through the centre. These are the guidelines for where you're going to place your flowers. That's why you didn't want to carry it on through. It would be very, very confusing. Going, oh, do I cover this or not? So that's why we left this bit till last. If you've ever wondered why there's a hole in some rulers, it's so that you can use it for exactly this reason. Put a thumbtack through the hole and put it right on the intersection of one of your outside lines. I'm working on a carpet so that it's a utilitarian carpet, so it can go straight in there. Okay, and now we're going to make the angles for this outside layer. So we're going to start at the intersection here where these 30-degree angles went. This ruler is 30 centimetres long. I only want it to be 25, so I'm going to put on the 5 mark. And as I go round with the ruler, staying in its spot there, and it's going to create the circle for me. Make sure it stays in place. And this is how you get those beautiful arcs. An arc being a section of a circle, as you can see on that plan. Because it is part of a circle. Connect them up. And then move on to the next one. Put it in the spot. Just about there. Because we are doing this with flowers, it's not going to have to be draftsman-like accurate. Starting at that there, and around the 5. And you're going to do this all the way around, and this will give you the curves. What do you do with this piece? You come back this way with it. See, that's a bit short there. All completed right the way around and starting to look very cool, and now we're doing that V shape in this section here. So I've nominated to measure down 5 centimetres from my smaller circle and 5 centimetres on this one. And then I'm going to find the middle of those two. It is, from there to there is 15.5, which makes it 7 3/4. I don't know why the maths has to be quite so difficult this time. And I put a little dot there, and now I'm going to connect from that point to there and that point to there, and that's going to give me the V shape. And here it is in the one that we're using as a guide, and you can see those V shapes. Doing this right the way around. What's amazing about this design is it can be done as a stunning wall hanging for a big space. I have done one in the past that used green ivy, red nandina, grey lamb's ear to give me the 3 colours that I needed, and I made it into a patchwork design. Here it is here, and it lasted 4 years before basically I got sick of it. The colours never faded. So imagine this done in the same way, and because it'd be done with long lasting leaves, you could actually draw all this out on a big piece of polystyrene. So all it's left to do now before I take it along to the Indian restaurant and get their approval is to cut out the edges. The edge is actually scalloped. The more precise you are with your measuring, the more even, the more symmetrical, the more amazing it's going to look. Hi!
Hello!
Good to see you. Hi! Here it is, here it is.
Wow!
You think it's going to work?
Absolutely, yeah.
Not too small?
Now, it's perfect.
The ones on the internet are huge, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely.
They're enormous things. But, so where's it going to go in the restaurant? As they come in the door?
Yes.
Oh wow, and it's not going to take us too long to do, is it, when it's that little?
Now, it should be fine, yeah.
So, Santos and Bendigo, can you tell us something about this festival, please? Because we know nothing about it.
Absolutely, yeah. Now this festival is from Kerala, which is from southern India, and it's a cultural thing which we thought we'll bring it over here and let the Kiwis experience the festival as well. So that's one of the reasons we are trying to do it in this place, especially being here for last 13 years.
13 years,
13
yes.
years.
What an amazing community.
This is the first time I'm doing this, and we are going to enjoy the moment.
Yeah. I found a piece of polystyrene that is 1 metre across, and the middle was already cut out for another project. But it is perfect for what I want to do, because I'm going to fill the centre of it with floral foam and have the polystyrene on the outside. The reason I want the floral foam in the middle is because this middle circular section here is going to be all rhododendron flowers that we have tested, and they will last long enough, and all sorts of other flowers, whereas the outside will be leaves. And so the polystyrene allows us to pin the leaves. The floral foam allows us to add fresh flowers. Now the floral foam, we only need a very, very thin layer of it, because I don't want it to be too much higher than the polystyrene. So I have divided it into 3 sections. I'm working in centimetres. If you take a block of floral foam and divide it across there, it is 8 centimetres wide, and 2.6 is a third. And so with those scored, I can now use my knife and cut down these as even as I can. So after I've cut them, and I'll need 3 blocks to fill in this area, I am then able to pack them in. This plastic is recycled from a US mail bag that came to us, and it's ideal because it is thick and it will not allow any water through it. So I'm going to just staple it on.
And then to trap in any water that does come through, I'm going to use parcel tape and seal the edges. Parcel tape is waterproof. All four corners, go to town, use as much as you want. Staple that parcel tape down here. On the corners, I don't really want to create a hole for the water to leak out of. Now when I turn it over, the floral foam will either stay put, open like that. Okay, so we pop it in. So you can see now, I've got that lovely base to put the floral foam back in once it's wet. The restaurant wanted colourful flowers, so we picked calendulas, camellias, rhododendrons and freesias, as well as many different colours of leaves as we could find. I painted around the circle with red paint, making sure it was acrylic, just to get rid of that whiteness. And then down in the restaurant now, it was time to soak the floral foam. I didn't do it before we moved the mechanics because it would have been simply too heavy. So each piece went in, soaked, and went back in, rather like a jigsaw. Now I could put the paper back over the top of the whole lot, re-centre it, so I knew where the middle of it was going to be when I started, and I pinned it down so that it wouldn't move anywhere as I was adding all of the plant material and things. The next job was to prick out the middle part of the design. I had a nail, just push the nail in and follow the line of those V-shapes in the middle with the nail. So I'm creating a row of dots there. By doing this, when I lift off that middle section, the dots will be on the floral foam, and not sure if you can see it there, but there's my line of dots, and that's just going to give me a little bit of a guide of where to put the flowers. And just carry on dotting all the way around, but only in that section that has got the floral foam underneath it. Remember to do the same thing right round the circle so you know where the flowers will stop and the leaves will start. Now I'm cutting that middle circle. I had cut most of it out, just leaving little lugs behind so it was easier to carry. And with the circle cut out, the foam is revealed with all those lovely dots. And at this point it's starting to get exciting. We're almost ready to add the plant material. I placed a flower file in the middle and filled it up with water. This was, as well as marking the middle of the floral foam, the opportunity for me to put the freesias in, and of course the freesias do not like floral foam at all and are much happier in their own water supply. And then we started. This is 1100% quicker than we did it. It took 4 hours to complete this from woe to go. That is me doing it on my own, and a couple of times of course I had to change my mind about things. What I did discover was that for the size of the tribute, the flowers were too big. I should have used much smaller flowers to get a really nice strong line. Of course that would have meant more time, like 15 hours, which I couldn't allocate to this project. So if you're doing it, smaller flowers or a larger diameter to get the scale better, and that will give you a far clearer definition of those lovely zigzags.
The Indian people do it only with petals. They don't have florifoam at all. They scatter the petals in the sections and only expect them to last a day. Whereas this hot restaurant, 2 days of ceremonies plus a lot of people going through dining with all that body heat meant really for those conditions they had to be in florifoam to last, and they only just lasted the distance. The leaves were pinned down. First row of green are camellia leaves, and they were just pinned at the base, so the pins were hidden. The second row were feijoa leaves, the back of which are grey, and these were pinned underneath the yellow variegated coprosma leaves, so they shared the same pins. Not only was it quicker, it took less pins and everything was held in place that way. The next layer of red leaves are actually spring growth from a popular hedge. They were very, very soft, so I tucked them underneath the other leaves, hoping that the fact that they were completely and utterly fixed in position that meant they wouldn't curl, and they didn't. Finally, I had a little bit left showing, and so I cut some Magnolia grandiflora leaves up, the brown side showing just to fill in those gaps. Added the freesias as a little posy in the middle, and it was finally done.